Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Sally here, and this is Headspace for the Workplace, a podcast on how to cultivate a vibrant and psychologically safe and healthy workforce. We're joined by all kinds of really interesting guests, and today is Susan Winchester. Susan, say hi.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you or hear you out there.
Yes. And we're going to be talking about when your past gets in the way of your future. Susan, what are the two main takeaways our listeners are going to walk away with today?
Discover if you are an ASDP, and I'll explain that. And then also recognize the signs if you are on the unconscious wounded career path.
And then the third?
Oh, yes. And the third is to learn actionable strategies about how to step off that unconscious wounded career path onto the conscious healing career path.
Yay. So yes, we're going to have a bonus takeaway today, a third takeaway on this to get us into the healing pathway. Susan, what do you do every day, or what have you done for your career?
Well, what I did for my career, 36 years, I had an amazing career in the corporate HR world and played just about every single possible role you could imagine, with the last 16 years as Chief HR Officer for two amazing public companies. And I officially retired March 15, and now I'm focused on the work we're talking about today. That's a big focus of my energy, as well as a little part-time consulting and a big bucket I call fun.
Yes, the big bucket of fun is so important to our well-being. Well, first of all, congratulations on your retirement. You also have a book out there. What's the book's name?
The book is Healing at Work, a guide to using career conflicts to overcome your past and build the future you deserve, with co-author Martha Finney.
Love it. We'll put that into the show notes for sure. And what's a little surprising thing that when people learn about you, they're like, wow, that's super cool?
I think the surprising thing that people are always surprised by is the fact that I did competitive ballroom dance for 9 years.
Wow. That's really fun. Talk about a bucket of fun.
It was fun.
I'm coming back in the next life as a really great dancer, singer, artist. Yes, because there's just so much joy in it. I'm a wannabe, but I still have a good time. Well, tell us, Susan, why do you care about this topic? What drew you to this topic?
Well, what drew me to this topic is what I want to share with you is that I told you I worked 36 years in my career. 30 of those years, my accomplishments were fueled by my underlying belief that I wasn't good enough. And I believed it was my job to go in every single day like a hamster on a wheel and work as hard as I could to basically please and perform. It was like a constant daily routine of pleasing and performing. And if any of you out there are people pleasers or perfectionists, you know what this life is like. It's exhausting. We feel like nothing we ever do is enough. And we're constantly striving for unrealistic expectations. And if we're leaders, we're also setting unrealistic expectations for our teams. And for me, the way I handled those feelings every night, I went home and I felt a lot of what I would describe as painful emotions. So sadness, anxiety, stress, fear, worry. And what I used, and I think a lot of really high achieving perfectionists use, are unhealthy habits to try to manage those feelings of anxiety, the feelings of inadequacy, the feelings of anxiety. And my choice was Chardonnay. So I used Chardonnay to self-regulate. I didn't even know what the word self-regulate meant back then. I just knew that I was very agitated, in a constant state of hypervigilance, a constant state of exhaustion, no work-life balance. And when I wasn't at work, I was at home worrying about work. And probably the biggest cost for me was the fact that I wasn't emotionally available for my own kids when they were growing up. And I have a lot of sadness about that because I can't go back to those days and redo it. But what I discovered along my journey, living this unconscious, wounded career path, was how many of us are from a dysfunctional past. The research shows that actually over 2/3 of us experienced some significant negative things that happened to us when we were little. And I never made that connection before to growing up in a home, which I never would have actually described as dysfunctional. I had a dad who was unpredictably angry, but I knew people had it a lot worse than I had it. But the effect of that in my professional life was a sense of always being on guard, always being, worried about whether or not I was creating an outcome. An angry authority figure, for example, would be a huge trigger for me. And so I realized that I didn't have to live that career that way anymore, that I could have achieved the same accomplishments without all that pain and suffering. And so what I do in the book and what I do in my keynotes and my courses and everything that I'm doing now post the corporate world is teaching people how to step off that unconscious wounded career path onto the conscious healing career path, where we become really aware of how much our past is influencing how we think about ourselves, how we interpret what other people are doing, and then how we respond. And that we can learn completely new, much healthier ways of navigating workplace, in particular workplace conflict, those moments when we get the most emotionally triggered. Martha and I call those bumper car moments. We can learn how to navigate those moments and actually use the workplace as a laboratory for emotional healing. And, just one other quick note, because I want to explain ASDP. I mentioned that in my takeaway. When Martha and I were writing the book, we didn't really know what to call ourselves. We realized that a lot of people dealt with a lot of difficult childhood experiences, but there's really no term for us. There's certainly ACOA. ACOA is Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is an amazing organization and support group, a 12-step program. But we decided to create our own, which we call Adult Survivor of a Damaged Past, ASDP, which simply means that we are adults today in our professions. Oftentimes we're unconsciously unaware of how much the past is affecting us, and that we have an opportunity to show up every day in our highest functioning adult self. That doesn't always happen, but the A is a reminder that we have that opportunity. The S is about surviving. It's a word of resilience. It's a word of strength. There are many superpowers that come from being an ASDP, which we don't have time to talk about today, but there are a lot. The D stands for damaged, which means it's not only just the damaged or dysfunctional past, but often we carry our damaged beliefs about ourselves. I'm not good enough. I deserve to get in trouble. I'm not worthy. There's these limiting beliefs that we have, these damaged beliefs that we carry with us into our professions, completely unaware of how much they're influencing how we feel. And then the P, of course, stands for past. And it represents that while these things happened in the past, there are lingering things coming along with us that can be significantly influencing not only how we're experiencing the workplace, but if we're leaders leading teams, how we can cast a shadow throughout that whole team that actually is unhealthy. And if we're anxious, if I'm anxious, if I'm setting unrealistic expectations of myself and others, everybody's going to model that. That's the Sendelani concept of shadow of the leader. And so I am committed and passionate about teaching people how to transform their workplace experiences. I know that doing so will not only lead to higher levels of emotional wellness, but also will completely transform how we think about the performance, the human potential of the teams that we're leading, as well as, maybe even including employee engagement and retention. I think all of those things are connected to the well-being of the people that we're working with. In fact, you had a great quote the other day. I was reading some of your work, and your quote, "Working minds work better together." I love that. That is so consistent with my work and the passion that I have for helping people to do that. So that's why I'm passionate, changing people's experiences. I'm lucky I'm alive. Frankly, I drank too much alcohol. April 26th of this year, I will have been sober 20 years. I'm very grateful that I had a God intervention. And that's another reason why I'm doing this work. We don't have to turn to unhealthy self-soothing habits to learn how to regulate. And actually, we can use workplace conflict as catalysts for emotional healing.
Well, there's just so much there to unpack. I don't even know where to start. Well, you addressed your first takeaway, which is what is ASDP. And I love the fact that you drilled down into each of those words. Adult, we have an opportunity. Survivor speaks to resilience. Damage. I mean, I always love the metaphor. When we look at a flower that's not surviving, we say, what's wrong with the soil? Is it not getting enough water? Is there light? We're the products of our environment. Everything that's happened to us has created us who we are today. And without that awareness about what is influencing our self-talk and the behaviors that we engage in every day, we are much likely to repeat it to others. And I don't think that's what most of us want to do. So thank you for bringing all of that to light. The other thing I wanted to call out is that the workplace could be a lab for understanding, that we don't just have to be kind of passive experiences in there, that we can actually learn and create our own experiments in there to really understand what needs to change. So let's go to the second takeaway, which is recognize the sign of being on an unconscious, wounded career path.
Yes. So I described some of them. Being on the unconscious, wounded career path is the lack of connection between your past and your present. And it's lack of understanding of how much limiting beliefs you took away about yourself from your childhood are influencing how you show up and experience the workplace. So, for example, I walked away from my childhood with the belief that it was everybody else's job to determine my value, in especially men in authority. And my job was to be as perfect and as people-pleasing as possible to receive that validation. That is an unconscious, wounded approach to how you're living your career. And as a result, because I was basically giving everybody else my power, I was really a victim of my own circumstance. You know, for a while, I wanted to blame other people for being disrespectful, for not listening. And I learned along the path that actually I was creating a lot of the negative dynamic going on in relationships with people because of my neediness and my desperation for their validation of me. It can be really annoying. And so that's a piece of the unconscious wounded career path. Another piece of it is going in every day and just repeating old patterns. My patterns were people pleasing and perfectionism. For some people, their pattern is anger. They use anger as a way of trying to create a sense of safety for them, for themselves. Other people hide. It's the fight, flight, freeze behaviors. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn or please, right? So you see all of these behaviors in the workplace. There's this lack of understanding of how our old beliefs about ourselves, how our interpretation of other people's behaviors and comments, how we interpret that to mean something about ourselves. And then the old behavior patterns just get repeated over and over and over again. And it's almost like a lack of awareness of the past is actually like fire, is like fuel on a fire. It's just completely blowing up our emotional reactions to one another at work. That, and then using the unhealthy self-soothing habits, that's another component of the unconscious wounded career path. So those are just a couple of short, quick answers to your question of what are some of the signs of being on the unconscious wounded career path.
Yeah, I think similar to you, I was reflecting on your comment about that I let everybody else determine my value. I think, in my situation, I was conditioned from an early age that you are what you achieve. And so everything for me was chasing carrots, because if I could get a carrot, then I had value. And that also led to the same kind of hamster wheel kind of experience that you described. But it was, did I check a box and get an achievement? Yay, me. I have value. And I remember one mentor in particular, she said to me, well, I'm going to be the person in your life that doesn't do that. And I was like, oh, what does that look like? I have no idea. Yeah. So, yep. Thank you. All right, let's go to the third takeaway: learn strategies to transform onto a conscious healing career path.
Right. So here's the hopeful message that I want to share. And it comes from the science of neuroplasticity, which is essentially our ability to rewire the neural pathways in our brains. And also the research of positive psychology, which states that when we focus on positive things, we will improve the quality of our life and we will reduce the level of depression that we're feeling. And because of the science that underlies everything that Martha and I teach in the book and in everything else I'm doing, it gives us the realization that we can change how we think about ourselves, the beliefs we have about ourselves. We can start to manage ourselves, particularly when we're triggered emotionally. Those are those moments when we go right back into those old patterns unconsciously. When we have a bumper car crash with somebody at work and we are feeling very triggered emotionally, that is exactly the time that we can practice a new response. And it takes work. I have a 3-step process I teach, and it's not difficult. But it's those moments when I have a bumper car crash, I think, okay, bumper car crash, Susan, it's time to process yourself with the rapid power reclaim. My simple 3-step process. Believe me, I process myself all the time, but it's a heck of a lot healthier than drinking and or whatever your choice is to try to manage those emotional responses. And so the conscious healing career path is that constant learning how to practice new ways of responding and interpreting what's going on. When I get triggered and I feel like I'm small or insignificant or not valuable or unworthy or whatever's going on, I stop myself. Step one is I have to create choice. I have to process the emotion, the energy inside of me through sound, movement, and breath. There are different techniques to do that before I can start to think about how do I elevate my action, which is step two. When we're triggered, we are in fight, flight, or freeze. Our brain goes into survival mode. And thank goodness it did, because it kept us alive for the years of the saber-toothed tiger. And actually, I think even in our childhoods, that fight, flight, or freeze and our responses helped us navigate a sense of as much security and safety as we could create as little kids. But now in the workplace, that over response of being triggered, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, causes us to not be able to get into our prefrontal cortex where we have our problem solving, our executive ability to work through what's going on. So step two, once we process that emotion, is to elevate action and to think about, okay, rather than going into people pleasing, tap dancing like I used to, what would be one thing I could do to elevate my action that would be different? And then when I do that elevated action, step three is simply celebrate it. That's the act of neuroplasticity, the act of rewiring our neural pathways, because when we celebrate, it's a step towards integrating it into our identity. And so every time you get emotionally triggered at work, leveraging all this great science and research, we can actually start to learn and calm our nervous system so that we can start to respond differently. We start to have a very different relationship, not only with ourselves, but with everybody we're working with.
Wow. All right. That was some real good gold right there because, I've been working for a couple decades on the awareness around the activation because I know from years of stepping into the mud that the more I'm activated, the more I'm going, what the heck? The deeper the thing, whatever it is. Like it's about me, that something's getting activated because it's fixing in on something that I pay a lot of attention to in my mind. But your part about, so I know, like, take a break, take a break, calm down. What is this about for you? And, it's hard to do because it's just so immediate. It's so fast and so strong. It's like you touched a burning stove. You want to act right away. And I know, like, put it on pause because whatever's going to come out of your mouth right now, no good. It's not going to be good. So put it on pause, try to figure out what it's about. But the celebrate piece, that's a stroke of genius. That's the true rewiring of pulling on that strength to do these steps. Because it's really hard to stop the activation. But how we can rewire through celebration, that's great.
Yeah. And I wasn't particularly good at celebration. Perfectionists are not celebrators. And so I had to create a list in my iPhone, in my notes, to help me to know what I could do to celebrate. The other thing I would say about those moments when we're emotionally triggered, I know this is going to sound crazy. This is why I love bumper car moments. It's actually a moment to realize the person who you feel has just triggered you could not be a bigger gift. That person is a gift. Because when we start to own our responses and our reactions, and we start to take care of them through this processing work, through inner work, we actually start to heal. And so I used to think that the people who were triggering were my enemies. And I've learned this from my amazing coach, Celine DaCosta, that actually, no, that person's a gift because they're simply helping you to look at yourself in a completely new way. And so it totally shifts the person that you feel is, angered you, upset you, caused you to be fearful as a gift. But honestly, that totally changes the whole dynamic.
That's right. That's right. And then you feel a positive way towards them instead of them causing you harm or whatever it is. Yeah, exactly.
It's the conscious healing career path. That's the conscious healing career path. When you get to that point, we think, okay, well, let's see, Sally and I just had this conversation and I'm triggered, and oh my gosh, thank goodness for Sally, because now I can go do some work on myself and release some of the pain I have deep inside me.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Well, I'm going to go back and do a quick recap. I'm coming back to you for your final thoughts.
Yes.
So I'm talking with Susan Winchester here about unconscious wounded career paths and how they're deeply seated in things that happened to us often a long time ago. So largely out of our awareness, but we can pull them into our awareness and get out of the hamster wheel and notice the bumper car moments. Another phrase that you're using that I just love, because it adds a bit of levity to something that feels really uncomfortable most days. And like, oh, there it is again, a little bumper car moment. And really looking, at these shadow moments with some grace around, oh, there we are again. Let's think about this. Let's reflect on it and elevate what we're going to do here, and then celebrate our ability to do that.
Yep.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So Susan, what is something you want to make sure our listeners remember?
So 2 things. 1, damaged is not doomed, and the rest of your life is yours.
The rest of your life is yours. You can make choices to make it different. Well, thank you. You are a gift. You are such a gift to really helping us reframe this hard work that we have to do, and how it shows up at work. And we can make a different pathway forward. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Sure. You can find me at Susan J. Schmidt Winchester on LinkedIn. The Schmidt is SCHMITT, or my website is healingatwork.com.
Healing at Work. We'll put all of these contact things in the show notes. If you're driving and don't have time to write them down, you're going to want to connect into this body of work, which we just tapped the top of. So thank you again. Thank you to the whole team behind this podcast, Dave, Mitchell, Chase, Brooke, Elias. There's a lot of people that are trying to make this great. And thank you to all the listeners who are tuning in today, for really caring about this and trying to elevate the game and making our workplaces a better place to be for all of us. So in closing, working minds work well together. There we go. There's lots that we can learn from each other to improve well-being in our workplaces. Until we meet again, take care.